What is up, everybody? It is another episode of Esports with Emrick. Thank you for joining me. We are going to go over the 4-game slate that we have as opening day in the LCK is finally here. While I'm not super excited about the LCK as a whole, I am excited about 4-game slates. We've gotten a little bit of a tease with the LPL getting started and getting these past 2 days, 2-game slates, a couple good games, but we haven't seen any upsets. That's not good for me. That's okay, though. I think maybe we have a couple opportunities today to find some of these teams that might not be as highly owned, not project as well, but I think kind of have a chance at pulling it off. Of course, the first day we did actually get that upset. FPX was able to beat RNG, but unfortunately they weren't able to outscore them. So that was super unfortunate, or super unfortunate. And then last night, this morning, whatever you want to call it, LGD looked fantastic in game one, but looked every bit the part of 2021 LGD. It's been the kind of the same story for teams, different year, same story. LGD blowing series after going up 1-0. TT blowing a game after early gold lead. We've got a whole lot more of it in store. So let's go ahead. Let's take a look at some of the betting lines first. And let's see here. No, that's going to be a little bit. Boom. Let's do this. Here we are. Here we are. So today we have Rare Atom making their season debut against Top Esports. Top Esports looked fantastic at Demacia. I really like what they've done with the lineup. I do think that Tyon is probably not the right jungler, but maybe he's the right jungler for them. And then we have Ultra Prime, revamped roster playing against LNG. LNG obviously making a deep run last year, getting out of the World's qualifiers and into the group stages where they eventually fell, and then kind of getting rid of their weak link icon, adding Doingby. Huge favorites, minus 550. That number has come down a little bit. They were a little bit heavier, even as recently as yesterday. Top Esports also super big favorites at minus 600. We've got Rare Atom that arguably lost their best player in Fofo, was going to replace him with Forge. We saw Forge, get a win last night. Didn't look necessarily that great in some of those games, but now we've got Strive in there. We've got a new support as well in Zora, so we'll see how that all goes together. Look, I took a couple bets out on some of these underdogs, Ultra Prime when they were plus 400, and then grabbed some plus 1.5. I really don't want to bet any of the favorites here. It's just a little bit too heavy on these lines. I do think that Ultra Prime does take a game off of LNG, but we'll see. LNG, just a lot of hype coming into the season, a lot of hype even going into Demacia, and they just didn't deliver there. Again, take it for what it's worth. It's not a tournament that everybody cares about, and maybe they used that as a tune-up, and didn't really show anything. Over in the LCK, take a look here. We've got DRX and Sandbox, both with kind of new look lineups. DRX heavy favorite here at minus 200, Sandbox at plus 159. We'll talk a little bit about that. T1 and then Afrika Freaks has been rebranded to the Guangdong Freaks. They're plus 230 with a couple of guys that used to play on T1, going against T1, who is one of the top 3 teams in the LCK, one of the 3 favorites to win this. So we'll see. We'll take a look here. Let's take a look. All right. So when we're talking about these games, the pricing, like obviously you want to go to Top Esports. That's where the projections are taking us. The projections heavily favor the LPL teams, and justifiably so. It doesn't necessarily mean that's where we're going to end up. But RA historically, and even LNG throughout the course of last spring and last summer, wasn't necessarily a team that you always wanted to target whether they were winning or losing. They just didn't necessarily get a lot of points. They didn't score a lot of points, but the dynamic of that team maybe has changed a little bit. I've seen a lot of talk about Up coming in here and being the dog that a lot of people want to play. And that kind of concerns me. If everybody's kind of going there, I just wonder what kind of ownership that they are going to have. And I am concerned. I mean, when we look at this roster for Up, Elk, obviously, coming off of Team WE, that's a huge improvement. Crying, coming off a disappointing season with RNG, coming back to his E-Star roots with Shousey and, quite possibly trying to recapture some of the magic that made him a really highly regarded, highly touted prospect, this guy that people were excited that they wanted to replace Xiaohu. Because they just thought he was better. And, obviously that didn't turn out to be the case. But with Hacker, Shousey, obviously a pretty solid player down there in the support role. But Z's up in the top. The more I thought about this lineup, it's just really tough for me to see how they're going to take 2 games off of them. You got Ale against Z's. This is just an obvious gap here. I think Ale is just going to handle him, murder him, just do whatever he wants with him. In the jungle, Tarzan just significantly better than Hacker. Hacker's a serviceable jungler, but there's a reason Up wasn't good. Maybe it wasn't him, maybe it was. I mean, look, I don't know. I just think that there's a huge gap there. Crying, we saw what Crying was last season. We know what Dawn B is. And quite frankly, again, LNG is better in this position. In the ADC, this is one of the only spots that I think that they, Up does have an advantage, but not significant. I mean, Light is a good, solid ADC. Elk is just a little bit better. And then we go into the sub. I think this bottom lane for Up is the way that they're going to have to win. I do like Shousey a little bit more than Livmo. I mean, he just really has not played well recently, but maybe a change of scenery is going to get him back to that kind of spring finals MVP form that I always chase when I roster him. But nevertheless, so that's that game there. I do think if Up wins this game, they're going to do it through a lot of skirmishes. They're going to do it through the bottom lane. Elk is going to be probably the optimal player on that team. And when you look at this, he is the highest. He's not actually the highest projected. He's about the same as Crying. Unless it's a 2-0 where we have Elk just slightly a little bit higher. I have 2 sets of projections that are available. I did the 2-1, did the 2-0. Some of these things, as I've talked about, coming into the beginning of the split, not necessarily knowing the dynamic of the teams, they may be a little bit off, but so far so good with what we've had. So I kind of trust it. Just kind of take it from there. So, hey, look, we've got Up, we've got LNG. Now, we talked about the 2 different rosters here. Knight's projection in the 2-1 is actually a little bit better than in the 2-0, and I'm going to tell you kind of why. Knight is one of those guys that scores really well even in losses. His kill participation and kill share on this team, even in losses, is just astounding. So I have him projected, I think, at like 21 points in a loss. And, if that's the case, it's better than a game not played bonus. RA, a lot of times when we're looking at the way that a dog can beat a better team, a lot of times it's going to be through skirmishing. It's going to be through these fights. It's not necessarily a fundamental battle where they beat them all over the map because they're just not good enough necessarily to do that. RA was kind of that team last split that they were boring at times. They had a kind of a boring style, but it was basically they're going to let you make mistakes and they're going to be patient. And when you make the mistake and you overstep, you overreach, whatever the case is, they're going to punish you for that. Now, I don't know if they're going to be able to kind of do that same thing with Strive in the mid lane instead of Fofo. iBoy was less than impressive last year. Is he going to be able to step up? Is Strive good enough to fill Fofo's shoes? And then, Hung was a great support. Is this Zora guy going to be somebody that we can kind of rely on? It's apparently not even in the player pool here. So that's pretty cool. I didn't even realize that. I knew that there was somebody missing. Yeah. Okay. Well, you know what? We could probably do that. What do we have him here for? 75.27. So let's go. We're just gonna include him. Okay. 7. Oh, no. Then 64.44. Okay. All right. All right. We're just going to kind of pretend that he is that he's Zora now. Okay, cool. So we'll get that fixed possibly. It's a little late. I'm sorry I didn't catch that. But he is put in, well, I guess it's probably not even in the projections. But in any event, again, top lane here between these two teams, we are looking at Cube, who's a decent top laner. But again, Zoom, I have my concerns. I think Zoom wins this lane, and I think that the only advantage that RA possibly has is Leanne over Tyan. This could be a spot that in the jungle he's going to have to facilitate a lot of things. In even in this top lane, in this mid lane, supporting this bottom lane. Like he's just going to have to be all over. He's going to have a fantastic game. If he does that and he's able to do, the peak of his ability, then there's a possibility that RA wins. I just don't have a ton of hope for RA. I think Tess is one of my favorites to win this split. They looked fantastic. I think there's a lot of disappointment from this team over last split, the way that kind of ended, and just a lot of failed expectations in 2021 that I think 2022 is going to be a big one. There were a lot of rumors that Jackie Love was going to leave the team, that Knight might have left the team. I think they probably got together and said, hey, we have something good here. Let's make a couple of changes and let's take another run at it. So, I think they're ready. And I think that they're going to score well. The only challenge is that they're expensive. Jackie Love's up here at 8K, Knight's at 7,800. Leanne or Tyan is 74. So you're not fitting them in with a lot of the favorites, not at least comfortably. So look, now when we move over into the LCK, we have some new look rosters. For Sandbox, they have Dove playing top lane. He formerly a mid laner. We've seen this change before on different teams and different players. Usually does take a guy a little bit of time to do that. So would be interested to see how long it takes him to adjust. Krakow, one of my favorites, and Pios. This is a good matchup right here, but I think the advantage is to DRX. Zika coming over against Closer. I'm looking at the meta now. We've seen some assassins get played. We've seen some Akali, not so much from the mid lane, and not even in a lot of the ERLs. So my concern is how well Zika is going to play with a champion pool that definitely favors assassin type champions. He can still play these control mages. Your Victors, your Syndras, your who else is getting played? Your Vax. I mean, I think that's the champion that I'm really interested in seeing him play. I believe that he's going to play some LeBlanc. I think he's going to play some Vax. And, if they don't target ban those out, I think that could be a mistake. But I think that's the way that DRX can get ahead, is putting Zika on one of those kind of assassin mage type champions. If he ends up on the Victor, on the Syndra, on like a Ryze or an Orianna, I don't think that DRX is in a good spot. And I kind of like Sandbox, and there's a couple builds that we'll talk about that I do like Sandbox as a possible dog, one that people aren't really talking about. And I think it's based off of some of what we said. We just don't necessarily know a ton about this roster. You've got Deft. I guess that guy's not in there either. Interesting. Let's see. Oh, that's right. We don't know. It's going to be Envy or somebody else. I'm not sure. I think we'll just throw this in. 82.89 and 89.32. 82.89. Cool. So whether it's Ice, whether it's Envy, I don't think that necessarily. I mean, they're both kind of question marks. So the projection kind of stands there. We don't know how this team is going to play together. So some of these are really just kind of guesses on how this is going to work. And then you've got Beryl and Kale. Like, so just a lot of question marks in this game. DRX being a heavy favorite. I initially kind of am high on DRX season long, but I think I'm going to avoid them, especially in terms of how they're constructed with some of these other favorites. Last game of the day, the game that I really have no interest in is going to be T1 and then the new Freaks. But we have a T1 roster. We know what they're going to be. This is a slow team. I think a Freaka team is going to be a slow team as well. It's the late LCK game. We're not going to have guaranteed rosters. I'm just crossing this one off. Not interested in playing it. I'm interested in the other three, at least from a GPP perspective. Now, in cash, I think you can play T1, but no KF Freaks for me today. So let's take a look at some of these kind of cash options and what we can do with our rosters. So when we're looking at, the favorites, Tess and LNG, one of the things I like to do here is, set something up like this. And in my settings, I change the salary cap down to 80. I keep this up, take the team out. You can take more out if you're looking from a GPP standpoint. And let's just go ahead and generate 10 lineups and kind of see what we're getting. When we're taking a look at these two teams, we are getting, captains. We're getting support captains. So with sub captains, our highest score here is 622. So at 622, 75, that's an LNG. Take that off the screen. Now, if we go with DRX, we're getting a 635 with a Zoom captain. I like this a lot more. I do wish that we could play kind of this is probably where I'd go. I mean, look, they score pretty similarly. I think you get Knight in there over Zika. He's projecting well, but some of his projections are a byproduct of, his last split, basically. That was a little bit more meta favorable in a little bit of a different league. And, I don't necessarily know if he's going to have that same role on this team. It could be better. It could be worse. But I know what Knight's role is. I know what he provides. I want the 4 tests. I know that RA was a slower team last split. They weren't necessarily somebody that you wanted to target to get some high scores, but maybe with Strive, maybe with Zora, maybe with these guys that are on that team now, that kind of changes. So I think that this is a really strong kind of cash lineup right here at 635. And then the other cash lineup consideration, T1, I do think that they handle business. They're a minus 300 favorite. You've got something right here at 626 or even something right here, which I think is a really, really nice lineup at 631. But that DRX lineup is the one that looks like it's the strongest. It's not that big of a difference. So, whichever one you feel a little bit more confident in. I think my projection on T1 is a little bearish, and same thing with DRX though. So one of those two lineups is what I'm going to probably play in cash. Heads up, probably not in winner take alls, but heads up. That's probably where we're going to go. It's either going to be a Zoo captain or Zo captain with Owner and Kira, or we're going to do something like this right here. I think it was the same thing. We're going to go the 4 tests with the jungle support and then team from the other side. One of the spots that I wanted to talk about in terms of GPP, nobody's talking about Sandbox. I think that this is a lineup we can consider right here. A couple of these Jackie Love or Knight captains just feel pretty good. I like this one a lot right here. So that's a consideration that I would have. You have a ton of extra salary. So with that extra salary, if you want to go grab another team slot, like a T1 team slot, you definitely could do that. We can, I'd have to save this to do that. But this is a lineup right here that I think is going to be under-owned in GPPs, specifically smaller field ones. I think if you're entering into the main, you do go ahead and grab that T1 team slot, maybe the LNG team slot, something like that, and differentiate a little bit from there. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of the slate. Those are my thoughts. I do think the DRX wins, but I think Sandbox is super live. I don't have a ton of hope for RA. I believe that Tess wins this. I think that they win at 2-0. Maybe RA gets a game, but that's about it. I'm super bearish on LNG to start. There's no value in betting them. I went ahead and placed a bet when this opened on up, but the more that I think about it, the more that I feel that line is justified. And I think that there's just a little bit too much hype on up. And I think it all just surrounded, it's all surrounded by Elk, but just Z's just, man, he just doesn't do it for me. I think that's the problem that I have is that top lane is just going to get abused. That's going to be kind of a team that's toward the bottom, kind of where WE was last year. I mean, when you think about this roster on up, are they any better than what WE was last year? No. Are they better than OMG? Maybe. I think that's kind of where they are, is like a 9-7 team, a team that is going to have some hype. They're going to beat some of these bad teams, maybe teams like OMG. They're going to beat up on TT. They're going to beat up on, quite possibly this version of RA. And they're going to have a tough time against the LNGs, against the TS, against, RNG and some of these top tier teams, the playoff teams, maybe RA if they have the form from last year. So that's kind of where I'm at with up. I know that a lot of people have talked about them, but just, again, the more I think about it, I'm just not interested in it. And then when it comes to T1 and KF, just not enough kills. There's not enough kills back and forth. I'd be super surprised if either one of those teams was in the optimal. I'm not saying that it couldn't happen. I'm not saying that it won't happen. I'm just saying that the likelihood of the 4 games ending up in there, just take that one off the table. You don't have to worry about LCK lineups. You don't have to worry about, a 50-minute game between Faker and Teddy. I'm just not there for it. So I'll have more content throughout the week. The ERLs have kicked off. I've been doing fantastic straight betting those, but some of it's just been a little bit luck, I think, and it's been a guess. So working on that. So I'll see you probably tomorrow, and everybody have a good day.